The cigarette smoke curled upward in the dim office, illuminated only by the glow of a computer screen and the fading evening light. My boss, Catherine, hadn't spoken a word since I'd asked to leave early. The silence between us stretched like a rubber band ready to snap. I stood there, keys in hand, watching her take another long drag, her eyes never meeting mine. That's when I realized, she wasn't just my boss anymore. She was a woman who wanted something she couldn't have. And that something was me. If you've ever found yourself caught in the crossfire of workplace emotions, hit that like button. And subscribe to see more stories about the complicated dance between professional boundaries and personal desires. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. My name is Daniel Reeves, and 6 months ago, I was just trying to keep my head above water. After my wife Lisa's sudden death 3 years earlier, I'd been doing my best to raise our daughter Mia alone. She was 8 now, all gangly limbs and curious questions, with her mother's eyes that sometimes made my heart stop when she looked at me a certain way. I'd been working at Meridian Publishing for almost 5 years. The pay was decent, the hours were mostly predictable, and my boss Catherine Winters had always been understanding about my situation as a single parent. At 42, she was about 7 years older than me, divorced with no children, and completely devoted to her career. She ran our department with precision and high expectations, but she'd always cut me slack when Mia had school events or doctor's appointments. That Thursday in October started like any other day. I dropped Mia off at school, promising to pick her up from her friend Zoe's house later, and arrived at the office by 8:30. The morning passed in a blur of manuscript reviews and marketing meetings. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, Mia's teacher from last year. Still on for dinner tonight? 7 p.m. at Luciano's? My heart did a little skip. Rachel and I had been dancing around each other for months. Coffee after school events had turned into occasional lunches, which had finally led to me asking her to dinner, a real date. Our first. I quickly texted back a confirmation, then spent the next hour trying to focus on work while my mind kept wandering to what I would wear. At 4:30, I gathered my courage and knocked on Catherine's office door. She was hunched over budget reports, her dark-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, hair pulled back in her usual tight bun. "Catherine? Do you have a minute?" She looked up, her expression softening slightly when she saw me. "Daniel." "Of course. What do you need?" I stepped inside, closing the door partially behind me. I was hoping I could leave a bit early today. Around 5:30 instead of 6:30. I've finished the Harrington proposal and sent the quarterly numbers to accounting. Catherine removed her glasses, setting them carefully on her desk. "Is everything okay with Mia?" "Mia's fine. She's at a play date." I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Actually, I have a date tonight. First one in, well, since Lisa." Something flickered across Catherine's face, so quickly I almost missed it. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "A date," she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "Yes, with Rachel Miller. She was Mia's teacher last year. We've been friends for a while, and..." I trailed off, suddenly feeling like I was sharing too much. Catherine was silent for a long moment. Then she reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a silver cigarette case, something I'd never seen her use in the office before. Company policy strictly prohibited smoking indoors. "Catherine?" She clicked open the case, removed a cigarette, and lit it with a sleek metal lighter. The flame briefly illuminated her face, highlighting the tightness around her mouth. She took a long drag, then exhaled slowly, the smoke drifting between us. "So you need to leave early for a date," she finally said, her voice low. "With Mia's teacher." "Former teacher," I corrected automatically, then wondered why that detail seemed important. Catherine took another drag, her eyes finally meeting mine. They were cold, assessing. "You know we're behind on the Westfield account. I've already sent them the revised timeline. Everything's on track for next week's deadline. And the quarterly meeting tomorrow? My presentation is ready. I can email it to you before I leave if you want to review it. She tapped her cigarette against a small crystal dish that I'd always assumed was decorative. Ash fell silently. You've never mentioned dating before, she said, her tone conversational but with an undercurrent I couldn't quite identify. I shifted uncomfortably. It hasn't really been a priority. Mia comes first, and work second. There hasn't been much room for anything else. Until now. She took another drag. Until Rachel. The way she said Rachel's name made me uneasy. There was something almost dismissive about it. It's just dinner, I said, though we both knew it was more than that. Catherine stood suddenly, cigarette between her fingers, and walked to the window. With her back to me, she said, you can go at 5:30. Thank you, I appreciate. But I need you to come in early tomorrow. 7:30, we should go over those numbers again before the meeting. It was an unnecessary request. The numbers were solid, and we both knew it. But I nodded anyway. Of course. 7:30. She didn't turn around, just continued staring out the window at the darkening sky. Have a good evening, Daniel. I hesitated, feeling like there was more to say, but not knowing what. You too, Catherine. As I pulled the door closed behind me, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window glass. Her expression was one I'd never seen before, raw and unguarded, a mixture of anger and something that looked almost like grief. The date with Rachel was everything I'd hoped for. At 35, she was warm, intelligent, and laughed easily. Her curly auburn hair fell loose around her shoulders, so different from the practical ponytail she wore while teaching. We talked about everything, books, movies, our childhoods in different parts of the country. She told me about her passion for teaching and her dream of starting an after-school arts program. I shared stories about Mia that made her laugh until tears came to her eyes. When I mentioned Lisa, Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. Tell me about her, she said softly. And I did, how Lisa and I had met in college, her love of photography, how brave she'd been during her illness. Rachel listened with such genuine compassion that I felt something inside me begin to heal. Mia talks about her mom all the time, Rachel said. You've done an amazing job keeping her memory alive. I try, I admitted. Sometimes I worry it's not enough. From what I've seen, you're an incredible father, Daniel. Mia is kind, confident, and so loved. That's what matters. By the time we finished dinner, I knew I wanted to see her again. When I walked her to her car, the kiss we shared was gentle but full of promise. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in years, picking up Mia from her friend's house on the way. She chattered excitedly about her playdate all the way home, then asked casually, "Did you have fun with Ms. Miller?" I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. I did. Would it be okay if we saw her again sometime? Mia considered this seriously. Does she make you happy, Daddy? Yes, I said, surprised by how true it was. She does. Then it's okay. She paused. Mom would want you to be happy. My throat tightened. How did you get so smart? I've always been smart, she said matter-of-factly. I get it from Mom. I laughed, blinking back tears. Yes, you do. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 7:25, coffee in hand and thoughts still lingering on Rachel. The building was quiet, most employees not due in until 9 o'clock. I expected to find Catherine already at her desk. She was notorious for early mornings, but her office was dark. I used the time to review my presentation again, though it didn't need it. At 8:15, Catherine finally arrived, looking immaculate as always in a charcoal suit, but with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite conceal. Morning, I said, trying to sound cheerful. I've been going over the quarterly numbers. Everything looks solid. She nodded curtly, not meeting my eyes. Let's see what you have. For the next hour, she picked apart my presentation, finding fault with details that had never bothered her before. Her criticism wasn't constructive, it was almost as if she was looking for reasons to be dissatisfied. By the time we finished, my good mood had evaporated, replaced by confusion and frustration. Is everything okay, Catherine? I finally asked as she made yet another unnecessary change to my slides. She looked up sharply. Why wouldn't it be? You seem tense this morning. I'm focused on doing my job, Daniel. Something you might want to try. The unfairness of the comment stung. I have been doing my job. I've met every deadline, exceeded my targets. While rushing out early for personal matters. That was one time. In 5 years. She closed her laptop with a snap. The meeting is at 10 o'clock. The meeting is at 10 o'clock. Make these changes before then. As she stood to leave, I said, my personal life doesn't affect my work, Catherine. It never has. She paused at the door, her back to me. How was your date? The question caught me off guard. It was nice. Nice, she repeated, as if testing the word. Will you be seeing her again? Probably, yes. She nodded once, still not looking at me. Don't forget those changes. Then she was gone, leaving me staring after her in confusion. Over the next few weeks, Catherine's behavior became increasingly erratic. Some days she was the supportive boss I'd always known, asking about Mia and approving my projects with her usual efficiency. Other days, particularly after I'd mentioned plans with Rachel, she became cold and critical, finding fault with everything I did. Meanwhile, my relationship with Rachel was blossoming. We saw each other twice a week, carefully planning around our schedules and Mia's activities. Rachel understood my priorities and never pressured me for more time than I could give. When she finally met Mia officially as Daddy's friend, rather than her teacher, the two hit it off immediately, spending an afternoon baking cookies and talking about books they both loved. She's wonderful, Rachel told me later that night on the phone. You've raised an amazing little girl. She likes you, I said. That means a lot to me. It means a lot to me too, she replied softly. At work, things continued to deteriorate. Catherine began scheduling last-minute meetings that forced me to cancel plans. She assigned me projects with impossible deadlines, then criticized me publicly when I struggled to meet them. Colleagues noticed, giving me sympathetic looks when Catherine was particularly harsh. What's going on with you and Winters? My coworker James asked one day after a brutal meeting where Catherine had dismissed my marketing strategy as amateur and uninspired. I wish I knew, I admitted. It's like she's a completely different person lately. James gave me a knowing look. Word around the office is she's had a thing for you for years. I stared at him. What? That's ridiculous. Is it? The way she always gave you special treatment. Those long, working lunches you two used to have. Come on, man. Those were about projects, I protested. And she was understanding about Mia because she's a decent human being. James shrugged. If you say so. But ever since you started dating that teacher, she's been on the warpath. Doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. I dismissed James's theory, but his words lingered in my mind. I began noticing things, how Catherine's eyes followed me across the room, how she found reasons to touch my arm or shoulder during conversations, how she kept a framed photo on her desk from last year's company picnic where we were standing next to each other, both laughing at something now forgotten. Had I been blind to her feelings? Or was I reading too much into normal workplace interactions? The situation came to a head in December, 3 months after my first date with Rachel. Our department's holiday party was in full swing at an upscale restaurant downtown. I'd invited Rachel as my +1, and she'd fit in seamlessly, charming my colleagues with her warmth and genuine interest in their lives. Catherine had been watching us all evening, nursing a glass of wine that never seemed to empty. She looked stunning in a deep green dress that highlighted her elegant figure, something I might not have noticed before James planted those thoughts in my head. As the night wore on, Catherine's composure began to slip. Her laugh became too loud, her gestures too expansive. When she announced it was time for the annual department awards, her words had a slight slur. "And our final award," she said, gripping the microphone tightly, "goes to our most dedicated team member. Someone who always puts work first." Her eyes found mine across the room. Or at least, they used to. An uncomfortable silence fell over the gathering. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. "Daniel Reeves," Catherine continued, "come claim your award for most likely to abandon ship when something better comes along." Shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt my face burning as all eyes turned to me. "Catherine," our HR director said quietly, trying to take the microphone. "I think we should wrap this up." Catherine jerked away from him. "No, I'm not finished. I want everyone to know what kind of person Daniel really is. The kind who takes advantage of people's good nature. The kind who doesn't see what's right in front of him." I stood slowly. "Catherine, you're upset. Let's talk about this privately." "Now he wants privacy," she laughed bitterly. "Where was this concern for privacy when you were parading your girlfriend around the office? Making sure everyone knew you'd moved on?" Rachel stood beside me, her face pale but determined. "I think I should go." "No," I said firmly. "You haven't done anything wrong." Catherine's eyes narrowed. The perfect couple. The widower and the schoolteacher. How sickeningly sweet. "That's enough," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "You're my boss, Catherine. Not my keeper. And certainly not my partner." The words hung in the air between us. Catherine's expression crumpled for just a moment before hardening into something cold and unrecognizable. "You're right," she said quietly. "I'm just your boss. And as your boss, I expect to see your resignation on my desk Monday morning." Gasps echoed around the room. The HR director stepped forward. "Catherine, you can't." "I can and I will," she snapped. "This is my department. My decision." I felt Rachel's hand on my arm, steadying me. "We should go," she whispered. As we turned to leave, Catherine called after us, "She'll never understand you like I do, Daniel. Never." The room fell silent as we walked out, dignity intact but hearts racing. In the car, Rachel finally spoke. "How long has she felt this way about you?" I gripped the steering wheel tightly. "I didn't know. I swear, Rachel, I had no idea until recently." "I believe you," she said softly. "What will you do now?" I took a deep breath. "I'm not resigning." She was drunk and emotional. HR won't let her fire me over this. And if they do? Then I'll find another job. I reached for her hand. "This doesn't change anything between us." She interlaced her fingers with mine. "I know. I'm not going anywhere." Monday morning arrived with a sense of dread. I'd spent the weekend alternating between reassuring Mia that everything was fine and discussing options with Rachel. I'd decided to face Catherine directly, to clear the air once and for all. When I arrived at the office, I was immediately called to the HR director's office. To my surprise, Catherine was there too, looking composed but exhausted. "Please sit down, Daniel," the HR director said. "Catherine has something she'd like to say." Catherine met my eyes briefly before looking down at her clasped hands. "I want to apologize for my behavior at the holiday party. It was unprofessional and inappropriate." The words sounded rehearsed, but there was genuine regret in her voice. "I've been going through some personal issues," she continued. "That's no excuse, but it affected my judgment. I never should have threatened your position here." The HR director nodded encouragingly. Catherine has agreed to take a 2-week leave of absence to address these personal matters. When she returns, we believe it.